So welcome everyone to the last Reltio community show of the year. Promise to have more next year, but this show is building complex survivorship strategies in data modeler. So it's a little bit more technical, which a lot of you guys love that. So that's always exciting. Today's special guest is Saurabh Agarwal. He's a senior product manager here at Reltio. And he actually came to me directly and asked if he could do this. So there's lots of really cool features that he wants to show today. So we'll just have a small presentation that he'll share, and then we'll go deep into more of a demo, which is always better in my opinion. So we're excited about that. I am the director of customer community and engagement here at Reltio. So the rules of the show are normal, the same. Keep yourself on mute. All questions should be asked in chat, or you can take yourself off mute, ask the question. Just be courteous of, hey, we need to get through the presentation as well. And then this will be recorded, and it's being recorded and shared out to everyone on this and others that registered. This might not take the entire time, which is fine, but a lot of times it does, just because of the questions that we have. Rob, I'm going to hand this over to you and let you kind of introduce yourself a little bit, and then take it over.
All right. Thanks, Jess. Hi, everyone. I'm Saurabh, and I've been with Reltio for about one and a half years. I'm the senior product manager. Currently, I'm managing the areas of survivorship, console, data modeler, and so on. Before I start, I just wanted to, just give you a brief background as to why did we plan to have this show. So in the past, there have been multiple webinars where people from Reltio, they've discussed about what are the different survivorship strategies, and which survivorship strategy to use under what circumstances, what are different fallbacks and filter conditions, and so on. So all the previous shows, they were mostly about what to do and why to use a particular strategy, but the focus of the current show is how to do it. So if you might have noticed that in recently we've made certain changes in the UI. The new UI does not allow you to change the survivorship strategies, and also there have been enhancements on the data modeler. In the data modeler, now you can configure your entire survivorship strategy, the groups, the complex strategies using fallback and filter. So all of these new changes that you're seeing on the UI now, I just wanted to walk through those new features so that you get a good feel about what these new features are and how do we use it. All right, I'll start sharing my screen. So there's a small presentation followed by a demo. I hope you guys can see my screen.
We can, yes. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So to just give you a brief background, I just discussed that earlier all the survivorship. So basically, whatever was available to you for configuring the survivorship was on the sources UI. So on the sources UI, you could see that for any entity and attribute, what are the different, what is the current survivorship strategy. You could also change the strategy, and you would see that the operational value changes according to the strategy that you select. Now, in the new UI, we've removed that capability. In the new UI, you will not be allowed to change the strategies on the sources UI. And in fact, the entire configuration of the survivorship strategies has been moved to data modeler. And in the data modeler, now you can not just select strategy for an attribute, but you can create whole new groups. You can choose whether a group is default, not, and what are the different fallback conditions and strategies that you can configure on an entity, if there are any filter conditions. So the new feature that we built on data modeler, it is much more enhanced and complete as compared to what you already have. And the reason, and the main reason that we made this change is because, one, we believe that the survivorship strategy, the configuration of the survivorship strategy, is more of a data modeler kind of work. So it's somebody who has good knowledge of the data model, who understands the data well enough. They are the ones who should decide what the strategy should be. used for the entire entity. And what happened with the old sources UI was, if you change something on a particular profile, that change was applied to the entire entity. It was not to a profile. So assume that you're on an employee profile and you look at a particular employee, say John Doe, and you change the strategy for the first name to say from frequency to aggregation or something like that. You might assume that this change is for only this John Doe profile, but in reality, it impacts the entire entity. So all the employees will be impacted with this change. So that is why we believe that this kind of a change, which has such a huge impact on the downstream applications that consume the operational values from Reltio, it was very risky to put in a place where a lot of people had access to it. And that is why we wanted to move the configuration for survivorship strategies from the sources UI to the data modeling. Also, another thing on the old sources UI, a user might have had access to different rule sets. And if they selected a particular rule set, again, the expectation was that if you select a rule set, you see the operational values corresponding to that rule set. But in reality, the selection of rule set actually updated the selected rule set to be the default rule set. So again, it had like a major impact or major repercussions on the final operational values that would flow to the downstream system. So that is why we had to restrict certain features that were available on the sources UI earlier, and we moved those features to the data modeler. Yeah. So in the new data modeler, these are the features that you see we've started supporting. You can create and manage survivorship groups or rule sets, as we call it on the UI. You can create primary strategies.
So one question.
Yeah.
So what I heard from you, right? So in new data modeler or new UI, will not able to change the survivorship rule.
Yes.
Right. But still we have, still we can go to the older UI, right? We can switch that.
Right.
So for that, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So this older UI is only supported for this release. From 23.1, the old UI will be discontinued and all tenants, all customers will necessarily be moved to the new UI, mandatorily moved to the new UI.
Okay, and that's what I need to, because if we are in the older UI and if we need to disable that, then we may need to do some configuration, correct?
Yes, but this is going to be disabled from the new UI. So beginning 23.1, that is from the next release onwards, old UI will be discontinued and only new UI will be supported. Currently, we are in discussion with multiple customers to understand what are the gaps that they see between the old UI and new UI, any blockers that they see, and we are fixing those blockers so that the new UI is acceptable to all the customers before we roll it out.
Okay,
and I think that date is February. So
yes,
good. Yeah, there's another question, but Nicole, I'll ask that here short in a little bit. But let's get through some of this before I ask. So keep going.
All right. So you can create primary strategies, and then in this new feature that we've developed, we are also supporting more complex survivorship strategies. You can create fallbacks to your primary strategy, and this fallbacks can be in multiple levels, nested, sub-nested, and so on. You can also create filters, and then you can decide like for a particular filter, which is the fallbacks, which is the primary strategy you want to use. If you want to have different strategies for different filters, that is also supported. And in fact, you can also create fallbacks within the filters. So you have a filtered strategy. Within that, you can also define different fallback criteria and fallback strategies. We've also built an advanced editor so that, if you want to view the survivorship group and the strategy that you built, if you find it comfortable to view it in a JSON format, you can do that, or you can also use it to copy the groups across tenants and environments. So it's like something you've tested in dev and you're comfortable with that configuration. You don't need to rebuild it in test. Just copy the survivorship group and paste it in the advanced editor for the test tenant, and it works as this. Okay.
So before you get into the demo, can I ask this one question?
Yeah, sure.
So Nikhil says have we reached that point where changing survivorship generates event that gets pushed to SQS? So last we checked, changing survivorship doesn't tell us automatically what customers have been updated and required a manual analysis and data extract.
If you change the survivorship, this would not automatically generate events.
Okay. And
Only
then
further, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Now I'm saying only further updates to entities what will generate an event, and there you'll be able to see the operational value corresponding to new survivorship groups. But changing the group itself does not, or changing the strategy itself does not generate anything.
In general, the rule today is that data changes are reflected in SQS streaming. Metadata changes or configuration changes are not reflected in SQS streaming. So there will be no event generated for metadata or data configuration change.
That's right, Dimitri. I think these metadata changes eventually lead to change in the operational value. So it's still a pain point. So every time you change the survivorship, you have to manually figure out what customer groups or entities have been updated and then extract them manually out of Reltio.
We will evaluate. Yeah, it's a good point actually. Maybe we need to create a separate streaming configuration which will be reflecting the metadata changes. But today it's not supported, but we will evaluate this idea.
Be interesting. I don't know how you would identify it. It'd be interesting. I mean, with after the way it is right now, what I don't want to delay it, but it'd be interesting to know what techniques, if any, people are using to identify. Maybe at the end of the call.
I like that, Mark, and make sure you bring that up here at the end. So, could one of you guys explain the fallback strategy just quickly? What does that mean?
Yeah, I'll also cover it during the demo, but just to give you a brief idea. So assume that you define a survivorship strategy of, say, aggregation or whatever survivorship strategy that you define that returns a non-unique OV or that does not return an operational value. In that case, you can define fallback strategies so that you always end up getting an OV. So for example, if aggregation returns two values, you can define a fallback strategy of, say, recency, and the recency then may return you one unique value.
Thank you. And lastly, Robert mentions OV changes caused by survivorship not being published has been kind of a big pain point for them. So just as a FYI, as you think about this.
Sorry, what was that again? OV changes not
caused by survivorship not being published has been a big pain for them. It's a pain point. So
yeah, so Saurabh, we will need to evaluate this. It's a good feedback.
Yeah, it's just good feedback. That's all it is. Sorry.
Yeah, and by the way, Chris, just one comment on that. It's a problem if it is, and it's a problem if it isn't. So there has to be a way of controlling it, right? In some cases, it'll kill you if it does. In some cases, it hurts you if it doesn't. So just not one size fits all, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. So before I go to the configuration, I just wanted to quickly show you what the new UI would look like. Like I mentioned, the new UI does not allow you to change the survivorship strategies. So in the sources UI, you will still be able to see the rule types which are being used for each of those attributes, but nothing of this is editable. So you cannot change the strategies, or you cannot change the settings for a particular strategy. So now going to the configuration, within the data modeler, you'll notice that after you select an entity, so for example, I choose this entity, you'll find a new tab called survivorship. Can you select the survivorship tab on the home page? First, you'll see a list of all the existing survivorship groups. Okay, so these are all the different survivorship groups which are currently present for this entity. And I have the option to edit or delete a particular group. Okay, you'll also notice that there are certain details like this one is the default group, then different roles which have access to these survivorship groups, and total number of attributes for which the rules have been defined in this group. Click on it and you'll see a summary of what the survivorship group is about, different attributes and what are the rules which are being used for it, whether any fallbacks or filters are defined or not. And if you want to edit it, just click on edit and it takes you to this page. For this demo purpose, let's create a new group. So I'll just create some group. So this is the label and description that you currently see in the API. If say for example, I create this group for the marketing team, I'll just choose the role which is for the marketing team, and here I can go ahead and add attributes. Okay, so for example, I choose at times this page hangs. We're still trying to figure out why this happens. But in case it happens to you, you can click on the advanced editor and then go back to rules filter and the page will start showing up properly. All right, so choose all the attributes for which you want to define the survivorship strategy as part of this group. Sorry, I already had one. And then all the different strategies that we currently support. Okay, all of these strategies are present as a drop down. For certain strategies like source system, you also have the settings icon. Within the source system, you can drag and drop to determine the order of the source in order of priority. And also, if there are certain sources that you do not want to use, you can also remove those sources. All the removed sources, they're at the bottom, and you can include them back if you need to.
Couple of questions for you. One is, with the new UI, I've also noticed that when you're making changes, and this is not a question, when you're making changes to an attribute, it doesn't let you undo them like the old ones, unless, Ujwal is missing something. Is that a true statement?
This is, sorry, which attribute you're talking about? Is it this page that?
Ujwal, was it this page that we're talking about?
Oh no, I
Sorry,
just meant if you go in an entity and you just delete an attribute on the right side on the old UI, there'd be an undo button at the top of the page. This is not survivorship related; it's just an observation.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's good to know because I can talk to Karina about that.
I wasn't sure if that was intentional or I'm just missing it, because I think that's a pretty important feature to have. If you accidentally delete something, it's nice to just click the button and just undoes itself.
Yeah. Did you come to the UI webinar a week or two ago with Karina? You might be able to watch that because she went in depth on some of these new features and buttons and things like that.
Yeah, I can take a look at that. Thank you.
I'll send it to you. Don't worry. So some other questions specifically around this. Are groups a way of giving different BUs the options to own survivorship of groups of attributes?
Own, or it is also possible, for example, like the just an example that for the marketing team, you might want to have different strategy for the same attribute. For example, the marketing data for the marketing team is more accurate, say in their marketing system. So for them, the source system order might be different as compared to what you use for the other for rest of the teams, or as a default that you might want to use. So you might want to have a separate strategy or a separate survivorship group only for the marketing team. So it's the control still remains with the admin, with the data admin, but when somebody with this role fetches the entity, they will see the survivorship values which are corresponding to this survivorship group.
Okay. Keep the questions going. There's one kind I don't know if it's, yeah, there's another question for role-based, so non-default survivorship. Do any attributes not included leverage the default policy?
So the way it works is if the attribute is not defined here, by default, they take the LUD strategy, which is recency.
Okay.
Yeah,
Listen-
I'm sorry. The question was more that if, the attributes are there, they're populated, but in this group that's role specific, you're only including 3 of the 100 attributes. Do the other 97 then use the default survivorship?
Default survivorship as in the default survivorship for each attribute, which is recency, or you mean the default survivorship?
Default survivorship as defined in the default survivorship group. I'm sorry. Good question for clarity. Yeah. But we have a default survivorship group. It's attribute specific then, right? Any attribute that's not otherwise overridden in a role based would use the default. Default survivorship group.
Dimitri, are you sure about this one, or I can check with engineering?
Sorry, Saurabh, if you can repeat, because I got disrupted basically.
So if you do not have some attributes defined in a particular survivorship group, the remaining attributes, do they use the survivorship group of the survivorship strategy of the default group, or do they use recency?
They use recency.
They use recency. Anyway, I'll confirm, because I cannot recall the complete conversation, but we did have a discussion around it sometime back. But I cannot recall it completely right now. I'll confirm and I'll let you know.
That would be great.
Let's
Thank you.
confirm, yeah, but by default, recency is used. I think you can even do a quick test and kind of try it if we have time after the demo.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right, we'll keep going. There's a few more questions, actually a lot more, but we'll ask those here in a minute.
Okay. All right. Similarly, if you use the other attribute winner crosswalk, you'll see that it also asks you to select the winner attribute. And all the other survivorship strategies that we support, you can choose any of those here. So once you've created this the group, you can save it, or you can also go to the advanced editor and look at the survivorship strategy that we just created. The label, description, roles, and the strategies for each of those attributes. All right, so this was like the most basic. Sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, so could you elaborate on that other attribute crosswalk? What is that one? Other strategies we are familiar, but the new one that you added, it looks new to us. Like, yeah, other attribute winner crosswalk. What does that mean when you select a survivorship?
So what this means is, whichever crosswalk is the winner for full name, that same crosswalk will be used to determine the OV for first name. So other attribute winner crosswalk. So,
okay, so we are
full
not
name winner.
got it. We are not defining it. It's a dynamic, like based on whatever other field gets survived, use the same thing for these 2 fields.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And one other question, like if role, like we are defining 2 different groups, one with say example, this is marketing role, other we say maybe data administrator role, something like that, right? If both roles have some fields common, like, or if a user has both the roles, then which survivorship will apply for him, like either this one, that one, or when there is a conflict between roles?
If the user also has default, then the default will be applied for him. Okay, by default, the default survivorship group is applied. Otherwise, we're also enhancing the API to accept a parameter called explicit survivorship group. If you provide that parameter and you give the group name or the group URI, then this OV value corresponding to that group will be applied. If none of them is true, then in that case, I think it would be random. The first group that the user is part of, that would be taken up.
No, my question is like if user has this role as well as a role from other group, then what happens to him? Like now it's conflict of survivorship, right? The other
Right.
group might have a different rules and this group has a different rules.
Right,
If
right.
the
So in
user
this
has both-
scenario,
Mhm.
in this scenario, if the user goes to the UI, he will see option to select the group. Okay, so if I have
Oh,
access to,
mhm.
so
Sure, maybe.
if I have access to 3 different groups on the UI, I'll be able to see all 3 different groups. By default, the group which is marked as default, that will be shown. But I can go ahead and select another group, and you see that the OVs will change according to the group select.
Means when you say user can select, means the end user who is viewing the data in the tenant, right? For example, the entity. There
Yeah.
you will have some option to choose which group to select.
Yes.
Okay, maybe if you can show at the letter, then it will be helpful. Thanks.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So Chris, were there more questions, or you want me to continue?
I have one question.
Sure. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So with this different groups, you said if person has access to 3 different groups, so 3 different will be shown, and then the strategy can also be different. With
Yes.
the master data which we see, so will the values be different? So because see, master data is a core data where we can rely on, right? But with
Yeah.
this different groups, because the strategy is getting changed, so
Yeah.
will that make sense? I'm little concerned on the business value here.
So by default, the group which is set as default, that is used. So currently, when you call an entity or you export data from Reltio, OV values are set as per the default group. And this is
Default group.
the
Okay.
group which is marked as default. And this is an existing feature. So currently also your tenant might already have multiple survivorship groups defined.
Mhm.
But because there's no UI where you can see it, so maybe it is not easily visible. But when you go to L3 configuration, you might see that for an entity, there are multiple groups already defined.
But yeah, actually my question is more on the business side, because a master data is then something which we want to trust. So if
Right.
with different groups we are ourselves changing the strategies, so it might happen then for one master data, when for one of the group I was seeing some other first name, and then I suddenly see some other first name. So
And that is
how is
why,
it? Yeah.
So that is why we say that, this default group is the one which will be used in most scenarios. So if we want a master data to have just one value or one OV or consistent OV across the systems, we'll use this default value. But for specific scenarios, if you want to get data for a specific role, you can provide that extra parameter in the API to get the response for a specific survivorship group also.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. And so I want to stop the questions for now, and let's go on with the demo, because I know anytime you change something big like this, there's going to be a ton of questions, and I want to make sure that we get to as many as possible. Let's get through the demo, push your questions in the chat, and let's continue.
Yeah.
It's great. This is awesome.
All right. So we defined, so I just took a small example where we defined the primary strategy for 3 different attributes. Now let's go to the fallback and filter condition. So like I mentioned, fallback is used when the primary strategy does not result in a unique OV. In that case, you have the option to define a fallback. And we support 2 different criteria for fallback. One is called 0 or more than 1, and the other one is called more than 1. So for example, let's take this 0 or more than 1 example. So what it means is, for the full name, the primary strategy source system. If the source system returns 0 or more than 1 values, in that case, I can add a fallback with the rule type, say frequency. Okay. So this is how the system will behave internally. First, it will execute the source system survivorship strategy, and then it will check for this condition, 0 or more than 1. If the source system survivorship strategy returns 0 or more than 1 operational values, then all the crosswalks which qualified for the first pass, they will be passed into this rule type. And those crosswalks will be used to determine the survivorship strategy based on this fallback rule type. This again can be any of the other strategies that we support. or we can have more fallbacks for the same condition. Okay, if frequency also, just assume that frequency also ends up returning 0 or more than one value, you can again choose another survivorship strategy. All right, so there's no limit to number of fallbacks that you define, but you just have to be cognizant of the fact that the complex strategies that you make, more complicated it's going to be for you to understand those strategies well. So only define to the level that you think is actually practical and is the actual scenario that you might see in your data. Secondly, these are for the same criteria. You see that I've defined 3 different strategies which will be executed one after the other. Now, assume the condition there where for 0 or more than 1, I execute the frequency. Now, I want to have a different condition for the case where it is more than 1. Okay, so in this scenario, I can add a fallback, nested fallback. Now, with this nested fallback, again, I can choose whether it's more than 1 or 0 or more than 1 criteria, and there can be a different strategy for this condition. Okay. Now, in this scenario, the way it will execute is source system is calculated first. If that returns 0 or more than 1, then frequency is used. If frequency returns more than 1, then it will go to aggregation. If frequency returns 0 or more than 1, if it returns 0, it will go to the maximum value rule. So basically, these rule types are executed one after the other sequentially. So in certain conditions, you might not even need the nested fallback, but you have this ability here, just in case you have a complex scenario that you want to build using the logic on fallback. You have all the capabilities here in the UI. So after you've defined all the survivorship, all the fallback criteria for it, you can save this. And I'll quickly show it to you. On the advanced editor also. So the survivorship strategy is source system, fallback criteria using 0 or more than 1 condition, and then these are all the different fallback criteria that we just built on the UI. Okay. Next, I'll go to filters. Okay, so now assume that I have a situation where based on the value of a particular attribute, I might want to have different strategies. Okay, so for example, if the state is California, I want to use data from a specific source, whereas if the state is New York, then I want to use data from a completely different source, or I might want to have completely different strategy based on which state, which is the state of like the state of the data, whether it's address or address of the person or the location or whatever. So here in this condition, for example, it's full name. I'll just take an example. This might not make like a complete sense in terms of business, but I'll just show you how this is done. So for example, for this full name, assume that I want to have a different source system ordering if the let's take state. If the state is, say, California and New York. Okay. So if the state is, if the birth state is California or New York, I want to use the source system, and the source system, the order of the source system is this order. Okay. Now, so this is for these 2 states. Now, what if it's a different state? I want to have a different strategy. So I add this full name. The way this is implemented on the UI is you add full name again. You choose the source system again. You add a filter. And say for Georgia, you want to again have a source system, but the order is the order is different. So this is how the survivorship strategy will work in this scenario. We'll first check which filter is satisfied, whether it is CA or New York. If this is the case, this strategy will be used. If it is GA, this strategy will be used. And the final scenario, when it is neither of these 2 scenarios, which satisfy. In that case, I need to have another attribute with a default strategy. So full name without any filters, and this could be the default strategy that if the state is not CA, New York, or Georgia, then use this strategy. So we can build filters with different conditions, filters supporting different survivorship strategies, and each of those filter conditions can have their own fallback criteria as well. So this can get really complicated depending on the scenarios that you want to support. If it is like if you do not need any fallback, you can just leave it as is. Again, I'll quickly go to the advanced editor and show you what the survivorship strategy now looks like for this. Okay. So this is for the our attribute name. Source system, all the different fallback criteria with filter which is equal to CA or NY. Okay. Then we have first name and middle name. And this is again the name attribute with filter equals to GA. So sources order would be different. And finally, the default survivorship strategy for name when none of the filter conditions meet. All right. So once I've created the survivorship strategies, I can go ahead and save it. And that survivorship strategy is now available on the UI. And now here you have the option to again edit it and delete it. So, okay, this was the demo that I wanted to cover, Chris. Before I go back to the slides and discuss about what are the future updates that we're working on. If there are any questions around it, I think we can take.
There is. Yeah. So as Shaitan mentions, as we're looking now at changing survivorship through data modeler, does that mean we cannot change it in the source view like we did in the old UI?
Yes, in the sources view, until the old UI is supported, it would be possible. But once the old UI support is removed and only new UI is available, it won't be supported. So new UI does not support changing survivorship strategies on the sources UI.
Okay. How can we do conditional nested survivorship rules for a given attribute? So, example, source order for specific sources or
Sorry,
else
Chris,
most.
I lost you. I'm not sure if it's me or.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay now? Are you still there? Can you hear me?
Am I audible?
I think.
Chris, you're audible, and even Saurabh.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like it's me.
Yeah. Dimitri, I don't know if maybe you can help answer these questions. Are you still there? Yeah.
Some of them are, yeah, I'm here. Some of them
if you help.
Chris, sorry, I cannot hear anyone. I'll log off and log in again.
Okay.
Yeah, let's wait.
So do you want to wait, Dimitri?
Let's continue with the questions.
How can we do conditional nested survivorship rules for a given attribute? So like source order for specific sources, else most recent source.
It is possible. Well, on the question of how we better refer to the documentation, I'll not be able to just explain in a short answer, but some of it is possible. In general, survivorship rules in nested for things like ordering. It is a limited functionality compared to overall survivorship configuration. On the question of how, I'm not ready to answer right now.
Okay.
Check documentation of this. Yeah.
And then Nikhil says, default is recency, and Dan says yes, the value is LUD. Not sure what's going on there. But Ujwal says, I think you'd be able to change the default in the advanced editor via the JSON file. Thoughts there, Dimitri?
Yeah, so the way it works, there was a question around was default what will be applied by default for the attributes.
Oh, that's right.
Which will not participate in any group definition or rule definition. So by default, I have, because there was some confusion, I have a clear answer. By default, recency will be used in all cases, and if you want to change that, you'll need to include the specific attribute into survivorship group. The default group, it is default for the user or for the role, for the metadata security role. So default means if role is not defined, default rule group will be used. But default survivorship strategy is recency always.
Okay. And we're just gonna go through these questions because I'm not sure if Saurabh is on. Saurabh, can you hear me?
I can
Okay.
hear you now. Sorry, I don't know.
All right,
what
no
happened.
worries. So Dimitri or Saurabh, whoever wants to answer these, and Saurabh, I'll go to you first, but then if you can't, then we'll see if Dimitri has some thoughts. What's the value of using other attribute crosswalk winners? So what's the main intent of having that feature?
So this is one good example. You take full name for a particular full name from a particular crosswalk. The crosswalk which gives you the full name might also be the right source for the crosswalk, or might also be the right source for the first name and last name. So in this case, you create interdependency between these two attributes. Like to say that whichever crosswalks gives you the full name, use the same crosswalk to get the first name and last name. So basically, it's used to create interdependency between the attributes, where OV for one attribute is dependent on the OV for other.
Another good example, oftentimes use the same source for remaining attributes, the same as a winner for your address line one, because address line one usually have the most important part of the address, and this way you make sure that the rest of the address is came from the same source, basically.
Okay, cool. So one comment here, and I love it, and I think we'll do this. And the reason I say it is because you guys are here, but it could be helpful to have some sessions simply for Ask the Experts versus a demo. So I think, I like that idea. Maybe once a month, have a specific topic, could be survivorship, could be match merge or whatever, and then have experts on there ready for questions. Maybe I'll have 4 or 5 kind of ready, and then you guys can ask. So if you like that, put that in the chat. So a couple questions down here though. When we extract data from Reltio, which group/role will be applied to get the OVs?
We use the default survivorship group.
Okay. Next question. Maybe a bad example, but what I mean is if a certain, this is probably from earlier, but a certain condition of a survivorship rule is not met, such as not a specified source needed, that it will fall back to another survivorship rule, such as an attribute winner, crosswalk minimum value frequency. It's probably from another question. So I don't know, Cameron, if you want to take yourself off mute and kind of restate it. If you're still there, Cameron, he's not. It's gone. Next question. If there are different OV values for different business units, which OV value is extracted when extracting the data for the entity? Nikhil, I think we said that already.
Yes. So by default, the default survivorship group is used.
Okay. Yeah. Is there any limit? Go ahead.
But yeah, and when you say default, it takes recency. Is it like that? What is the
No,
default?
the survivorship group, which is defined as default. So you can have multiple survivorship for an entity. The one which is default, that is used. If the default survivorship group does not have a survivorship strategy defined for an attribute, then recency is used for that attribute.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Is there a limit on number of fallbacks?
There is no practical limit, but just to ensure that we do not necessarily complicate the survivorship strategy. So there's just a guideline that do not have too many nested fallbacks, because that is going to that might impact the performance if the number of the calculation is too long.
That makes sense.
And also, logically, I don't think you'll be able to build too long, fallback list, because you'll resolve operational value in one or another pretty soon. So.
Yeah. Has any survivorship strategy functionality actually changed, or is there just a change in how survivorship strategies are configured in the UI? So, the UI is now provided for configuration we previously had to do in the L3 directly. So is there any change? Is it just
no change in the strategies itself? It's only that earlier thing that you could only do through the API, you can now do it on the UI.
Thanks. Great question, Michael. Are you able to add filters to survivorship strategies from the UI as you are in the L3? I think that's answered already. So
yeah, during the demo we did.
Yeah. And any capabilities for survivorship not supported in the UI?
So right now we are currently we are working on few other things, and that is my final slide, which I'll cover. Right now, say for example, on the rule sets, on the sources UI, in the old UI, you can select different rule sets that the user has access to. And earlier on, during this webinar, I did mention that you'll have the same capability with the new UI, but that is not built yet. So apart from this, I think we have covered everything that is required to configure survivorship strategies.
Okay. And just two more questions. One is, how can API call get a non-default survivorship data?
So we're adding a new parameter. It was released yesterday, I think. The parameter is called explicit survivorship group. So if you provide that parameter and you provide the URI of the survivorship group that you want to use to fetch the data, that is what the API will return. It's the get entity API.
Okay. And during extracting, is it possible to get the business-specific survivorship group?
During bulk extract, I need to check that. I'm not sure right now.
Okay.
Do you have a clue?
I can answer this one. It is actually possible. So if you configure rule sets within your tenant, you can apply kind of metadata security towards those rule sets. And if the user or the service account only has some rule set defined for it, then it will export data using that rule set. So you can have specific service accounts or users that can extract OV data per their rule set. Yeah.
Jacques, wow, it's great to hear your voice. Thank you. All right, that's all the questions. So if you want to go ahead and show your last slides on what's coming.
Yeah, just.
I do have another idea for later, but just keep going.
So I think that is the only thing that we're currently working on. Selection of rule sets on the sources UI. The problem with the old UI was if you selected a rule set, that rule set became the default rule set for the entity. And again, then the problems with some unintentional update that you did not really wanted to make that the default rule set, but if you only wanted to view the operational values corresponding to the new rule set. So in this scenario, there's like with the old UI, we always ran into a risk that somebody might unintentionally update the default rule set, causing a lot of data issues in the downstream system. So now what we're doing is we will have that rule set selection feature on the UI, but the rule set that you select, that does not become the default rule set. It will only update the operational values for the profile that you're currently viewing. So it would be a read-only change that will help you to view what the OV values for the selected rule set will be, but there will be no changes in the configuration as such. And secondly, with this new data modeler enhancement that we've done, although you can configure your survivorship strategies in the data modeler, But right now, you do not have the ability to see what the profiles would look like when you implement this survivorship strategy. So right now, you do not have the ability to test out the strategies before saving it. So this is something that we want to build in near future. We want to give you the ability to also test the survivorship strategies before you save a configuration.
Great. And just kind of a quick thought is ideas for identifying what entities, so attributes, are changed by a survivorship rule change. I think that's an idea. So
Okay.
No, actually, what I was asking Chris is that earlier we had talked about some people were doing that, so there was an enhancement discussed. I'm just wondering how people are doing that today. If they're doing a survivorship rule and it's not resulting in events going out, how would they figure out what's impacted? It sounds like some people are maybe doing that.
anybody wants to speak up? Thoughts? It's a good question.
We were the impression that like if there is a data change happens either via data update from source or due to survivorship, we expect that event to get triggered so that we can publish that to downstreams. If that event is not triggering, then we don't have an option to publish this change data set to our downstream systems.
Sorry, I'm not entirely sure, but Dimitri, do you know if the user runs the reindex job, will it trigger events? I think it will not.
Reindex, no way.
Reindex will do.
Reindex will do. You have two modes. You can switch it off and reindex without generating the events, or you can reindex with generating the events. Yeah. But the question from Santosh was different. The question was if I change the operational value, survivorship group, an operational value changed as a result of that. In this case, it will be recalculated basically. In this case, I think we discussed it in the beginning of the call. So basically, event will not be generated, and we need to evaluate this idea. It's a good idea. We need to work on it, and I understand how this is a pain point today. And as we also discussed in the beginning of the call, we need to make this configurable as well. So in some cases, you want to generate these events. In other cases, you don't want to generate SQS event in the event of recalculation of the operational value after the survivorship group change.
Right. Yeah, you can make it as configured. That will help. Yeah, we can.
I think somebody on the call said that it was difficult to do, but they had a way of doing it. I was just wondering, in the interim, if somebody has done this, what are they doing with the current capabilities? Because I don't have a thought as far as how to do that. Right? Somebody mentioned it was difficult to do, but it was doable. I mean, what somebody else on the call, one of the other listeners, not the presenter. Maybe
I was kind of looking back to see if they said that in the chat, because a lot of people dropped. So I don't know if they're still there.
Maybe search with delta will return you the changed value. So it's not SQS event, I think. So we will, we can get back to this conversation specifically because we need to.
Two more questions, and Mark, maybe post that on the community, and as we do these Ask Me Anything, maybe others will speak up to that as well. So do we have an option to build our own survivorship strategy other than the ones listed in the UI?
No, you can.
No,
you can only use default strategies.
It's a straight no. Okay. One question, will the UI allow us to understand which survivorship rule is being used when a user is viewing the data? So, I'm thinking about the confusion when two people are viewing the UI, one person using the strategy X while the second person using strategy Y. So a minor issue, but it still could be confusing. So I think there's an approach to publish during a reindex. Publish event on change, question mark. Does that make sense?
For the first question, I think which was whether the UI will let you see which survivorship group or strategy is being used. Yes, that's true. Right now, also in the new UI, you can currently see the strategy which is being used for each attribute. After we make the rule set updates, which is planned for release by this as part of this current release, you'll also be able to see the current rule set or the current survivorship group which you are viewing. So yes, that would be possible.
Okay, and then the second question is, I think there's an approach to publish during a reindex. Like, is it publish event on change?
So
Maybe
I think
Robert,
this
speak up a little bit. Might be better on that question. You can unmute.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't know that I could do that. Otherwise, I would have spoken up. Yeah, so we've used the technique during a survivorship change. I know we've done it where then you go and you ask for a reindex, and there's an attribute that allows you to essentially say, hey, if you see a change during this reindex, publish an event. We've used that during when we've changed survivorship in order to sync to downstream. I'm pretty sure we've used it. I just don't have the exact details on the attributes or the exact reindex that we used, but I'm fairly certain that we've updated the survivorship and told Reltio, hey, go look at all the data and publish events. It obviously created a huge cascade, which we had to throttle and stuff, but I'm pretty sure someone was alluding that there is a way people have done this in the past. I'm pretty sure we did that. So anyway, sorry, messaging is confusing a bit.
If you use the reindexing task specifically, yes, in this case, it will generate all the events. And you're right, it will be cascade throughout the entire tenant.
Yep. So Dimitri, so that's, again, someone asked, is there a technique that's been used in the past during survivorship changes? I'm pretty sure that's it. There could be more. I just don't, but anyway.
Thank you. Just with that though, would it generate only events for those things that have actually changed, or everything that's getting touched because of the reindexing?
No, it should just be on change.
That's what I would hope for. The Reltio guys, is that your understanding?
Yeah, it depends on the way you reindex, I think, because you can't just reindex the actual Elasticsearch index, so you can do reindex with full update that will touch the entire tenant. From top of my head, I didn't do this for a long time, so I can do a quick testing and get back to you with this. I just don't have it from top.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah.
Yep. And Mark, we've been able to deal with these, throttling or the cascading effect of change. It's just a challenge. I mean, any kind of streaming platform has similar challenges. It's not a Reltio problem, So anyway.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, that's good. Thank you. That was great. Well, that is time for today. Really some great discussion today. And I love the ideas of doing more of these kind of ask the expert anything specifically around a topic. I think I'm going to do some of that. It's a great idea, Mark. Thank you. But hopefully you liked it. Saurabh, thank you so much. And Dimitri, thank you for jumping in, and everyone else. Wow. This was really great, but take the survey at the end. Whenever you leave, survey pops up. Ideas are always welcome. And trust me, I take those and start pushing out some of these shows. So thank you everyone for coming. Come to the community.reltio.com, ask questions there. You'll get answers pretty quickly. Other than that, have a great holiday in the rest of the year. We'll be back in January. So thank you, everyone.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. All right. I'm going to end it.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.